Welcome to the first sports note of December. It is Monday, December 4th, and we all know by now the controversy and the chaos that happened over the weekend. We actually saw Georgia upset by Alabama in a game that, quite honestly, come the fourth quarter, was really not that close. We saw Michigan take care of their business with the shutout win over Iowa. We saw Texas run up the score on Oklahoma State, putting up 35 points in the first half, and it could have been more. We actually saw um, a classic, another classic between Washington and Oregon. Even though Washington started to pull away, the final score was not indicative of really how close it was. Washington opening up that 10-point lead with about 3 or 4 minutes to go. But Texas absolutely deserved to get in as the number 3, and that's who we're primarily going to talk about today. A lot of people are saying the question was, does Alabama get in over Florida State? Both are conference champions. You've got 4 conference champions in the playoff, which means somebody was going to get left out. Ironically enough, the 2 teams that primarily got left out are the 2-time defending national champions who had a 29-game winning streak snapped by Alabama, who got in as the 4, and an undefeated Florida State team who won the ACC. They are the first undefeated conference champion to ever be left out, and also the first really undefeated Power 5 school ever to be left out of the playoff. And this is where a lot of people are starting to split hairs, and there's a lot of talk and a lot of controversy around this. Florida State is absolutely crushed. They're going to get Georgia in their bowl game, and now the matchups are Michigan against Alabama. Michigan's coming in as a 4.5-point favorite, and then we've got Washington against Texas, where Texas, being the lower seed, is a 4-point favorite over undefeated Washington. I feel that the committee did get everything right this year. Last year, where I thought Ohio State should have been left out because they were a one-loss team, might have had a conference champion in here somewhere. I thought there were other teams that were more deserving than Ohio State, and a lot of people, I understand there was a lot of talk that you could have had a Michigan-Ohio State semifinal, but the committee was setting that up to be able to get an Ohio State-Michigan final. Both of them lose in the first round. And then this year, you've actually got Florida State, who, had they handled business, actually, they did handle business, deserved to be in, except for the fact that one of the other things that the committee does look at that a lot of people are forgetting here, they do actually combine the resume with the eye test. And let's be completely honest, after Jordan Travis got injured on the first series against North Alabama back on November 18th, the Florida State program, the entire football season, basically goes down the toilet. Florida State did throw for over 250 yards in that game, but then they only had 123 against Florida. And then in Saturday's ACC championship game, a game that they beat Louisville only 16-6, threw for only 55 yards. Travis is not coming back. Their backup quarterback was ruled out for that game against Louisville. And if he only is throwing for 123 against Florida, who really took a nosedive after coming out of the chute, hot through their first 4 or 5 games. If they're only putting up 123 against Florida in the swamp, what are they going to do in a semifinal against 3 of the top 8 defenses in the country right now? And certainly the more high-powered offense. Florida State does have an elite defense, but Texas absolutely deserved to be there. Alabama, with their win, somebody from the SEC was going to get in. It was an absolute right call to leave Georgia out and to put Alabama in. The question was not, did Florida State deserve to get in over Alabama? It was, did Florida State deserve to get in over somebody like a Texas? And that's what a lot of people are forgetting. Texas came from 7 and jumped up to 3. Texas, except for the final 15 seconds of the Red River shootout, which was the only loss on their schedule, had Texas held that lead, won that game, we'd be talking the Texas Longhorns are the number one team going into this tournament right now. And then at that point, if Jordan Travis, let's say Jordan Travis would have actually gotten hurt a couple of weeks earlier in the season, as he even said in his infamous tweet from yesterday after they got shut out by the committee, that it would have actually shown that Florida State, with that elite level defense, could have actually still kept going and then been deserving to be able to keep Alabama or even Texas out of this thing altogether. Texas made probably the strongest case of anybody in the country to be able to get into this tournament for anyone who was on the outside looking in. We're talking your Ohio State, we're talking Oregon, we're talking. I mean, Florida State was in; they actually got supplanted. Ohio State was sitting at home for the third consecutive year on championship week. Last year, they got in because there weren't enough strong teams at the top of the Power 5 conferences that were conference champions, conference losers in conference title games. Kansas State won the Big 12 over TCU. Kansas State was not strong enough to get into the tournament, but TCU lost that game very, very late and absolutely deserved to get in. The year before, Cincinnati had run the table, even though they got boat raced in the semifinal. In 2021, Cincinnati absolutely deserved to be there, kind of shattering the glass ceiling, because there was really nobody else in the Power 5 conferences that had a resume as good as Cincinnati. There were very few teams that had a resume as good as Texas. There were very few teams that actually had as good a resume as Florida State. Now, Florida State might have actually had the most impressive resume, but it's still the fact that if they were going to put in the 4 best teams as opposed to the 4 most deserving teams, Texas is not only one of the 4 best, but they are also more deserving than Florida State, as was Alabama. Quinn Ewers, there was talk once upon a time that they wanted to kind of rush Arch Manning into that space. Quinn Ewers was not lighting up the college football world, putting up, numbers like Michael Penix, Bo Nix. He wasn't putting up gaudy numbers like Marvin Harrison Jr. did at Ohio State this year. But Quinn Ewers kept Texas, kept the ship righted all year, did exactly what he needed to do, did not have a terrible game. They had a lot of close games, but the Big 12 was very competitive. The Big 12 was not as dominant in the top 10 as the Pac-12 was all year. And the Pac-12, take the Colorado BS out of the entire equation. The Pac-12 was the most talked about conference in all of college football. So we knew that the Washington-Oregon game was kind of like an eliminator, like you might have in pro wrestling, you might have in UFC. They call those eliminators. So it's kind of a win you're in. So it's almost like it was a quarterfinal, even though we don't expand in next year. That's another thing that a lot of people are forgetting here, is that ACC, brass, namely their commissioner on the CFP board, voted multiple times against expanding this playoff until their hand was kind of forced with all of the realignment coming next year, where they don't really have a choice. If this would have been a 12-team playoff, then absolutely both teams would have been in. And the worst case scenario is that you would have actually had Florida State, who still would have gotten in, but they wouldn't have gotten that first round bye. They would have actually hosted Liberty down in Tallahassee. The first 4 would have actually, the 4 that you have now, would have had their byes. Mike and I will talk about that until we're blue in the face, possibly with our buddy John Rice on Saturday. We apologize for not coming to you this Saturday. Mike was a little under the weather, and we just could not get the show in. Let him get, Mike got himself, right, feeling a lot better. We'll be ready to go for Saturday night. It'll be our last actual serious show of the year. And we're going to break all this down. We're going to talk about how a 12 team would have looked this year. We're going to look ahead to how it's actually going to shake out for next year. We're going to break down a lot of this in detail. We're all going to make our arguments. You're getting mine right now. Mike actually sent me a text message, and I will actually try and read you guys exactly what this text message said. I will share some of the conversation with this. I actually had texted him originally earlier in the day: 1 Michigan, 2 Washington, 3 Texas, 4 Florida State. I think Texas gets the TCU Cincinnati treatment that they should get bumped, but you can't leave an undefeated out. But we know Bama likely gets in somehow. That was at 11 a.m. before any of the games had started. He texted me at 12:30 yesterday saying, literally as they were being announced, saying, what an absolute joke. I say I have zero issues with this the more ESPN breaks it down. FSU's quarterback play was shit the last 2 weeks. Alabama basically had a road game and dominated most of it yesterday. I'm stunned Georgia fell to 6, but I love Columbus fell an extra spot. Me trying to get my typical Ohio State dig in there. He says the sheer fact that you're okay with an undefeated conference champion not being allowed to compete for a national championship tells me I really don't know you at all. And then he actually sends me it's a Mizzou Ohio State Cotton Bowl. We'll get into that on Saturday because it's now officially going to be me versus him for the second straight college football, major weekend or rivalry. So it was Ohio State and Michigan. He's still going to get his punishment. I promise you. I kind of told him what I already had in mind. I may still do it this week. That's going to remain to be seen because now we're going to be a week removed from that. But I still think typically the committee gets this right. I think Ohio State got a little bit of favoritism last year as a realist, not so much as a hater. But it was also something that Ohio State kind of had to go in because they had the strongest resume for some teams that were on the fence. In this particular case, Texas absolutely deserved to get in. Florida State, with the Jordan Travis injury, absolutely should have been left out. It sucks for them. I do like what Mike Norvell has kind of done with the program. It's kind of washed the very sour taste of Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Bowden out of my mouth. I kind of respect Florida State a little bit more as opposed to hate them almost as much as I hate Ohio State. They're not Free Shoes University anymore. But this is something that, getting back to Texas, an elite defense, and they're still putting up 35, 40 points a week, regardless of who the opponent is. When Florida State started tumbling backwards, Texas started going forwards, putting up 55 points against Texas Tech, rolling up 600 yards of offense, 600 plus yards of offense against Oklahoma State on Saturday in that dominating win. The defense just doing whatever they want to right now. It's going to be very interesting on a neutral site on turf, climate control and everything. Just what Texas's defense is going to be able to do against that incredible Washington offense with Penix, at the helm. And I think also, not for nothing, I think Michael Penix kind of locked up the Heisman by beating Bo Nix for the second time this season back on Friday night. So let me know what you guys think. Where do you guys come out on this? Did Texas deserve to get in? Should Texas maybe have been a 4? Should Alabama have gone higher? If you got 3 teams for 2 spots. So which 2 should have gone in? Where do you slot them? What's the bowl game that you're looking forward to that might not be in the playoff? Could it actually be the Ohio State-Mizzou game? Could it be Florida State-Georgia? Even though it's the game that one would be a game that nobody, participating on either side really expected to and wants to play for. If you saw the interview between Mike Norvell and Kirby Smart. But Mike and I, again, will be back with you guys, back and better than ever on Saturday night. It, again, will be our last official content-related show of the year. Our last show of the year will be next Saturday night, the 16th. We'll talk more about that as we go on Saturday night. It'll be our best of. It'll be kind of the Wise Ass Sports Network Part 2. But again, we'll talk more about that then. Everybody have yourself a great rest of your week, and I will see you guys probably next week unless something more comes out with this later on this week. Take care.